think it's recording. And now we're going to go through and we're going to talk about the different ways that we control force production. Okay. All right. So this is part of our signaling process. We're going to circle back to a lot of this. So now we're on the first slide of the next set of PowerPoints. Okay. You guys remember on the first day of class when I asked everybody to line up, right? Line up by who we think is the strongest, or look around and think about the person in class you think is the strongest, right? What was the one thing, right, that you guys were likely looking at to say, that's the person that I think if I had to bet is the strongest? Size, right? Who's the biggest person? Who has the biggest muscles? Okay. And so what we're going to go through today is some of the underlying both anatomy and physiology of why some of you are stronger than others. What are the properties of your muscles? What is the anatomical differences and things that go into all of this? Okay. The first and foremost thing that allows us to generate force is the size of our muscles. Okay. It's the size of our muscles. If we look at, if you'll go down several slides to the one where it looks like there are stakes on there, right? Those are MRI cross sections of my quadricep from back when I was doing my doctoral dissertation. The bigger the cross section of the muscle, so the wider the muscle is, right? Think about your bicep, and I'm just going to cut your bicep right here. The bigger the cross section, okay? The larger the muscle, the more likely there is to be more actin and myosin in that muscle. Therefore, we can form, in theory, we have the capacity to form more cross bridges and therefore to generate more force. Okay? So that is one of the really common things that we want to look at is size matters for force production. Okay? Size matters. You see this in your own muscles, right? You would imagine that your legs are stronger than your arms. They're larger. Okay. Your arms are longer than the muscles in your fingers. They're stronger. So cross-sectional area really matters. It really matters. Okay. But it's not the only thing that matters. It's not the only thing. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things about contractions, and then we'll get into some of the other things and how that stuff is going to manipulate everything, how that's going to work to help all of this matter. Okay. I assume when you guys took anatomy, you all talked about agonist and antagonist muscles and synergist muscles, or these accessory muscles, correct? Okay. So when we talk about an agonist muscle, what we mean is the primary muscle that generates the majority of the force to execute a particular movement. Okay. Now, when we do large movements like walking or running, right, it requires many, many muscles doing many, many different things and controlling posture. And so it's a little bit more difficult for us to isolate agonist and antagonist with complicated movements like that. But for relatively simple and straightforward things, like let's just take a bicep curl as an example, okay? I'm going to do a bicep curl. The agonist muscle or muscles are going to be, right, the elbow flexors. It's going to be the biceps and the biceps brachii, okay? You're going to get a little bit of brachioradialis in there too, right? I think those are the right muscles. Again, no anatomy. The antagonist muscle tends to be the muscle that opposes those things, okay? So when you do a curl, you're still going to get some level of tricep activation to help stabilize the elbow joint, okay? So here's a concept that we absolutely have to understand right now, okay? When I do a curl, I need a bag. Let me do this. All right, nope, well, this will be better. When I curl my Diet Mountain Dew, when I curl it up, okay, agonist, I'm getting force production from the biceps. I'm also getting force production from my tricep. So in order to make this go up, okay, this is what we call a concentric contraction. I'm shortening my bicep muscles. How much force do I have to generate to pick up this can of Mountain Dew and curl it up? How much force do I have to do? Five newtons. Okay. In a relative sense, I mean, I don't know. It might be five, but right. How much does this can weigh? Okay, not much, but like in a real, from a physics standpoint, how would we figure out what this can weighs?
Its mass.
We need to know its mass. Very good. What else do we need to know?
The acceleration of the movement.
Okay. There's another acceleration that we have to take in. Why does this can weigh anything? Gravity. Very good. Okay. It weighs what it weighs because it has a mass and gravity is acting on that mass. Okay. 9.8 meters per second. So, right, if I want to be able to curl this up and move it like this, how much force do I have to generate in my bicep? Okay, that's true. That's true. We're going to get to that in a minute. That's very good. But that's going to help me with what the muscle has to do. But in a sense, I have to enact a certain amount of joint torque on this to make it move. Is it the same as what this weighs? Is it more than what it weighs, or is it less than what it weighs? Okay, how much more? Okay, that's right. That's how we would figure it out. But how much more? A little bit? A lot? Depends on the speed, depends on the acceleration, as you guys had talked about. Okay, to do a concentric contraction, the muscle has to generate, or the joint torque has to be slightly larger than the mass, okay, multiplied by the gravity of the object you're trying to move. Now, to do a curl, I not only have to lift the can, I also have to lift my forearm, okay? So I have to have enough force to pick up both my arm and the can, okay? Keep that in mind. And I have a little bit of force from my tricep that is acting just like gravity, that's trying to push the can down, okay? So whenever we do concentric contractions, the force production from the agonist muscle has to exceed the force generated by the antagonist, the force exerted by gravity on the mass of the object I'm trying to move. Okay. It has to be just a little bit higher or a little bit larger than those. Okay. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand those two things as concepts? Okay. So if I generate way more than what I need for this, what's going to happen? I will smash it into my face, right? I'll throw it really fast behind me, all right? Sometimes that's a thing we want to do. If I wanted to throw this or I wanted to jump or do things, I have to do it very fast. I have to care about my acceleration. We'll talk about that probably on Monday. That's called muscular power. That's right. It's force multiplied by velocity. And so there's this relationship there. But we have to understand what we're actually doing and exerting to get movement in the first place. Okay. Now, if I want to do this, okay, it's an isometric contraction. I'm holding the can in place. How much force am I generating in my bicep.
Equal to the can.
Equal to the can and my forearm and my tricep. Gravity is exerting on the can and on my forearm. So that's the price of doing business, right? On those things. Unless any of you guys can magically like make gravity not work right here. That'd be pretty cool. We could probably make some money off of that. Okay. So an isometric contraction occurs for one of two reasons. One, you're holding something and you're exactly matching, okay, the force of gravity on the object, your limb, and the force applied by the antagonist muscle. Or the mass of the object, okay, is so large that you cannot generate a sufficient amount of force to move it. So when you push or pull on it, the muscle can't move. Okay. So we'll do it the other way. That kind of a contraction is this. I'm pushing on the wall, right? So much mass, gravity acts. I can't move this. So when I push or if I were to pull, I cannot exert enough force to cause it to move. Okay. Those are the two ways that we get isometric contractions. Okay. Does that make sense, guys? And all of this is going to become really, really important as we move along today and on Monday to understand some of why do we get so much force in this kind of contraction? Why do we get different forces in other sorts of contractions? Okay. Now, let's do the third kind. Let's do an eccentric contraction. An eccentric contraction is where the agonist muscle is lengthening. Okay. So I'm doing this and I am lowering my can of Mountain Dew down. I'm lowering it down. Okay. How much force is my bicep generating then? Less than the can. Exactly right. Less than what gravity exerts on the can and my limb and whatever my tricep is doing. Okay. I'm letting gravity win, basically. Okay. But I'm generating just slightly under what I need because I'm lowering it very slowly in a very controlled manner. I could just drop it, right? And then gravity wins that way. But this way, it's slow, it's controlled. I'm just under, okay? Just under. Those are our kinds of contractions, right? Now, if we look at, and I'm going to tell you guys kind of a weird, crazy thing that's probably going to seem counterintuitive. We mentioned it last week, okay? When I do a concentric contraction, okay, I have thousands or hundreds of thousands of cross bridge cycles that are happening in order for me to move that muscle up through its full range of motion. Okay. So it's here, motor cortex, ping, 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 all the way through. Engage a cross bridge. It starts to move. Okay. I then run the cross bridge cycle. I break actin-myosin apart. I then get more action potentials coming and I start the whole thing over again. And it just goes around and around and around and around over and over and over again. Okay. So to do a concentric contraction, we have to break actin-myosin apart in the cross bridge cycle a huge number of times. Okay. In the cross bridge cycle, we use energy to break the cross bridges apart. Because of that, concentric contractions use comparatively the most ATP, the most energy during a contraction to get a certain amount of force compared to isometric and eccentric contractions. Okay. When I do an isometric contraction, because I'm holding it steady, okay, I'm holding it steady, I don't have to shorten the muscle. So I don't have to break the cross bridge cycle break the actin and the myosin apart nearly as many times because it's just lock the cross bridge in and hold it right there, hold our force production. Boom, right here, I'm locked in, okay? So it takes less energy to hold the can right here than it does to pick the can up, okay? So in theory, then, if you were going to look from a fatigue standpoint, from a metabolic standpoint, I ought to be able to hold it right like this longer than I could up, 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 okay? Now it's a can, I can hold this for a pretty long time, but that's where we're going to get on this, okay? But it all comes back to where do we use the energy in this entire signaling pathway? We use it at the end in the cross bridge cycle, okay? Now, what about an eccentric contraction? I'm going to lower it down, okay? To lower it down, not only am I not shortening, I'm actually lengthening, right? I'm stretching the muscle, okay, in some ways. And so when you do an eccentric contraction, you break the cross bridges in the cross bridge cycle even less than you do during an isometric contraction, okay? Even less. So if you guys will look at, it's on like slide 4, there's two bikes, this old black and white picture of two bikes, okay? In a classic experiment about how we learned about all of the energy use before we figured out what was going on in the cross bridge cycle, they did this. They're two bikes. They face opposite directions, okay? They have one chain on the bike. So the bikes are basically together. The wheel that turns, that you put the chain around that drives the wheels, they're actually hooked together. So when one bike pedals forward, the other bike pedals backwards, okay? One bike pedals forwards, the other one pedals backwards. And so what you do then is they put people on each bike and you ride the bike. One person goes forward, the other person goes backwards, and you fight against each other, okay? And the graph under that, what you guys will see is they were measuring oxygen consumption. They're measuring aerobic energy generation or use while cycling forwards on the right panel, backwards on the left-hand panel, okay? And if you look, when it goes on the right-hand panel, right, as it goes from not a lot of force as you make it more and more difficult on the bike to cycle, right? We're going up in intensity, up on our settings, like in spin class, or if you're on the Peloton, then energy use kind of goes up in this kind of very linear manner, okay? Think of that as I'm walking uphill or something, right? As it gets harder and harder and harder. When you're going backwards, though, at the exact same force production, right? It's the same force. It goes this way. It's this very, very shallow kind of slope of increase in energy use. And so you'll note when they get to the very end, right, that the person going eccentrically, cycling, going forward, is very concentric contraction heavy with your quads. So it's pedal forward, 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 concentric contractions, quads, glutes, okay? Lots of cross bridge cycling, lots of energy use. When you go backwards, it's an eccentric contraction, especially with quads and glutes. Very little cross bridge cycling to get that same force production. So you can see it's, like a third as much energy use to be able to go eccentrically, okay? This is a study from the 1950s where they first began to observe these kinds of things. And this fits, right, as we talked about last week, when you walk downhill, downstairs, it's much easier than it is to go up because you're doing an eccentric contraction. Gravity's the same, your body weighs the same. The force you have to generate it's slightly different because to go up, you gotta beat gravity ever so slightly, and to go down, you gotta let gravity win. but it's very close. But you just use so much less energy eccentrically. Okay. Okay. Can I get a volunteer? I'm going to show one more thing about eccentric contractions. Can I get a volunteer? Okay, great. All right, come out up over here. Okay. Okay. I would like for you to jump as high as you can.
Jump as high as I can?
Yep, back up a little from the edge. I don't want to, I'll get in trouble with your coach if this happens. Jump as high as you can. Okay, pretty good. One more time. Okay, good. All right. Is jumping a concentric or an eccentric contraction based activity for his quads and his glutes? Concentric, right? Concentric. Okay. Now, does he do a purely concentric contraction though? No. What does he do first?
Loads the muscle.
Right. He loads. What's he doing to load the muscle?
Squatting.
Squat. Can you squat for us? Okay. You good to hold it right there?
Yep.
Isometric contraction. Okay. Isometric contraction in his quads, but we've lengthened the muscle, right? As he goes down, eccentric contraction, right? What are we doing in the muscle? Okay, or around the muscle. You can stand up. So what are we doing around the muscle? It's not in the muscle itself, or it's around the muscle, kind of very close. As he goes down and does that eccentric contraction. Can you jump high without doing that? No, no, no eccentric first, just jump. Okay, thank you. You can go and sit. What are we doing? Okay, we're close. We're close. We may be lengthening the sarcomeres a little bit, right? But there's a non-muscular thing that's happening. Down, down. What else is happening? What else is getting stretched? Connective tissue. Very good. Okay. You have endomysium, paramysium, epimysium, tendons, ligaments, so you have this connective tissue. When you do an eccentric contraction, okay, as I start to stretch the connective tissue, does that connective tissue want to be stretched? No. It's like a rubber band. So it resists against the stretch, okay? So as I go down, part of the reason that I don't just fall flat down is eccentric contraction force, but also there is some resistive force from connective tissue as we do an eccentric contraction, okay? And so the reason this works when you want to then do a concentric contraction, it's called a stretch shortening cycle. I go down and I stretch the connective tissue and then I store elastic energy. And then when I do the concentric contraction, I release that energy because it goes back to its sort of shortened connective tissue state. So you get more force. But part of the deal that we get with eccentrics, as you guys will see a little bit later on, is I can generate more force. I can lower down more weight eccentrically than I could ever hope to pick up concentrically, okay? If I had a dumbbell and I was going to do a curl and you gave it to me up here, I can lower down another 20 or 25% more weight than I can be able to pick up, okay? And that is because the muscle's the same size. I can form the same number of cross bridges, okay? But I get extra force that's going to be from that connective tissue not wanting to get stretched out, okay? So these are some things that make eccentric contractions really unique. They cost us less energy, and under maximal conditions, we can get more force eccentrically than we can concentrically or isometrically. And we'll illustrate a little bit of that either later today or on Monday. Okay? Question?
Is that the reason why plus or the negative is helpful? Or like build up the strength of the or does it be more important?
So it's a fascinating question. One of the things that we can do when we do eccentric contractions, or if you do negatives and those kinds of things, is you will be able to move more weight. Or if you can't do something like with your body weight, like if your body weight is too much, like I couldn't do a fucking pull up. There's no way, right? I'm too old. I'm too out of shape. I'm too heavy now. I couldn't do it. And so, but I could probably lower myself down. So we will talk in a little bit about how we train the nervous system to turn on more and more of our muscle to let us make use of our cross bridges. And during eccentric contractions, that pattern may be a little bit different, but it may let us exert more force and actually, we will see if you want to make your muscles bigger, you need eccentric contractions. In a lot of it, you need to stretch the muscle. You need that negative portion of those things. And so there's some really useful things from training about some of that. I would be really hesitant to say that that's the absolute best way to do those things, but it can be helpful. Right. You guys may see people, people learning to do pull-ups, they make these big bands. You can wrap the band around and you put your foot in the band. And it does the same thing as an eccentric contraction. You're in the band and you stretch the band out. And so when you start to pull, then the band's going to help shorten and try to pull you up, kind of an assistive thing. And that helps us learn how to do this sort of motor pattern of turning our muscles on and helping out. And we can then get better at doing what those things are. Okay. It's a good question. Okay. All right. Everybody stand up. Pardon?
And now we're all.
Yeah. Okay. Walk around a little bit. Just kind of get your muscles warmed up. Sure. Okay. All right. Now, I need everybody to find a partner. You need a partner. Introduce yourself to your partner. Say hello. Hi. Okay. All right. Now, here's what I want you to do. Okay. This works better in the fall because it's like September and people are still wearing like short sleeves and things. But here's what I want. One partner, put your arm out like this, facing your other person. Okay? Arm out like so. Now, what I want you guys to do is think about their bicep. Okay? Look at their bicep, stare at it. Okay? Now, guess for me. Okay, in what direction do the muscle fibers in the bicep run in relation to your humerus and then the biceps tendon that's going to connect down onto, does it connect onto the radius? I don't know. See, again, anatomy fails me. I think it's the radius. What direction do the fibers run? Here in this, where are they going? Talk to your tell your partner. Okay. Who thinks that? Who thinks they have it? One group. I don't know. We'll pick somebody. Over here in my gray Oklahoma sweatshirt. Okay. So do that again. Sorry, I was confused. I was meaning the girl behind you, but that's okay. It's fine. We got lots of Oklahoma sweatshirts. So here, in what direction do the fibers run? Okay. What is that in comparison to the way the humerus runs and then also the direction of the tendon?
I'm gonna feel that.
We're gonna go there.
Yeah.
What do we call that? You guys know? Parallel. Very good. Perfect. It runs parallel. Okay. Now, I want you guys, because you've all had anatomy, haha. Find a muscle. Find a muscle. Don't touch the muscle, but just talk about it on your partner where maybe you think the fibers don't run parallel to the joint or parallel to the bone. My bicep is very easy. It's all very straight, right? They shorten and we do this. You have lots of muscles that don't do that. Find one. Okay. You need a whistle or something, right? Okay. Lower my voice. All right. We'll pick someone back over here. Green Bay Packers. I like your sweatshirt. Okay. What's your name? Maddie. What did y'all come up with? A muscle that does not run parallel to the bone or the joint. Somewhere in the back. Okay. Any place in particular in the back? Okay. Your lats, right? You want to turn around and show us your, lats and those things. Okay. They said lats. Guys, what did y'all say? Pecs. Okay. Anybody else? What other ones we got? Shoulder, delts. Okay. Anybody else? Some of y'all were like looking at your like forearm and your wrist and traps. Okay. Piriformis. I don't even know what that is, but it sounds great. Sounds all sure. Could be right. Could be wrong. Okay. Now. Okay. I'm going to give you all a tough one. I'm going to give you a tough one. Quad. What do you think about your quad? Which muscle? I don't know. Pick one of the four. Okay. Very specifically, we'll say rectus femoris. Right here, rectus. It runs here, and I do this. Do you guys know what direction the fibers run? He's right. They come in like this, like a fan. Okay. You guys can sit down. Thank y'all. Okay. So the point I'm trying to illustrate, okay? All muscle is muscle. All muscle has actin and myosin and fibers and myofibrils and those things. But the arrangement of the fibers in different muscles is not the same, okay? So not all muscle is created equal anatomically in its arrangement. And this creates some differences in the ability of certain muscles or muscle groups to generate force at a certain joint, okay? The angle at which the fibers are going to come in and connect to the tendons is called pennation, okay? It's called pennation. So let's envision, okay? Here's my bicep. It's this terribly drawn box. There's the bicep tendon, okay? The fibers in the bicep are arranged like this. All of them, if they try to shorten, they're in direct line or parallel to the line of pull of the tendon, okay? That's called a fusiform type of pennation. The importance of pennation is every bit of force generated by the cross bridges in a muscle with this arrangement gets transmitted directly onto the tendon in the same line of pull as we want the lower arm or the forearm to move. Okay? I'm going to say a word to you guys and you're going to want to throw things at me. Okay? Vectors. Anybody had physics and learned about vectors? Anybody had Christina in biomechanics and talk about vectors? Anybody had trig? You want to talk about cosines of angles and things? No, nobody wants to do that? Yeah, want to do it? Okay. So we're about to talk about it, but you don't have to do calculations. Okay. Other muscles are not arranged like the bicep. Some muscles, here's the tendon. And they have fibers that come in from both sides. Okay. Or they have fibers that come in all from one side. Okay. When we have a fiber arrangement where it comes in at an angle to the tendon, okay, that is called a pennation angle, right? If you were going to mathematically assess this, right, we would call this angle here, right? That's a pennation angle. When something comes in at an angle, this would be better if it had wheels on it. But imagine on the bicep, I pull. Everything is in line. All of the force comes this way. Let's say I'm the rectus femoris or the medialis, something in your quads that are this arrangement where they come in from both sides. Now, the fibers are going to pull like this. I still want the chair to go this direction, still this way. But the fibers come in and they're going to try to pull where I'm going to get both this direction and this direction. Okay. And so the steepness or shallowness of that angle affects how much of the force is going to get directly applied in this way. Okay. So you may look at me and think most of the muscles in your body have some level of pennation. And you may look at that and think, well, Dr. Black, that doesn't make any sense. When you have pennation, you lose a percentage, 10, 15, 20% of the force that is generated by those fibers is not going to get applied to the tendon in the direction that we want that joint to move. Okay. So you may think, well, why on earth would we do this? Right? Why is this a useful thing? And it comes down to size. Okay. We can calculate something called physiological cross-sectional area. Okay. PCSA. And so in a muscle like the bicep, you cut it open, and then this thing right here, that's the cross section. Okay. All of the fibers are here and they're doing that. In, let's say, in a quad, in the rectus femoris, what it actually is, that's the cross section. Okay. If you cut across sort of at the perpendicular like this, I didn't draw my lines very well. That whole thing is the cross section. And so what having pennation lets us do is it lets us pack more muscle fibers into a given area than we could if it was a fusiform muscle. And even though we lose some force by the fact that they come in at an angle, we compensate for that by the fact that we can pack in 50%, 100% more fibers. We overcome that loss of force because of pennation by being able to have more fibers. Okay. And that's the usefulness of pennation. When we resistance train, we can actually change the angle of pennation. Okay. And when we change the pennation angle with resistance training, then you change that thing and you actually lose less force. Okay. When we pack more things, especially in our quads. Okay. So that's one of the ways, again, All of you have a pronation angle, let's just say in your quads or your delts or your lats. Some of you, there's going to be differences. And so you might have the exact same amount of muscle as your neighbor. But if it comes in at a slightly different pronation angle, then you're going to have different levels of strength because that muscle's ability to apply its force to the tendon is going to be a little bit different. Okay? So when we talk about what are the things that contribute to why you are however strong you are, one, the biggest thing is it's how big is your muscle, but it's also what's the pronation angle of the fibers within that muscle. Okay? So not all sort of area or size is exactly the same. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. We're going to talk through a couple of more things, but this is how and why everybody is a little bit different. There will be people in this room that have smaller muscles than others who will be stronger, right? That's just how this goes. Okay. So size, pronation. Okay. There's some pictures in here. We can measure pronation angle in superficial muscles using Doppler ultrasound. You can come down. We actually did a capstone project with that a few years ago. You go down Dr. Kellerwan's lab and he slaps the ultrasound on and we can see the direction of your fascicles as they're going to connect. So it's pretty cool. Okay. Now, the next thing, and I would argue outside of muscle size, this next thing is the biggest contributor to how strong you are. Okay. And the next thing is called motor unit recruitment. Motor unit recruitment. So, again, I'm just going to draw this as a box. Okay. You have a muscle. Let's just say it has 100 motor units. Okay. A motor unit is what? Remind me what a motor unit is. You better know it a week from now.
Motor neuron and all the fibers in there.
Okay, good. So I've got a motor neuron, its axon is coming in, right? And I got another motor neuron and its axon is coming in. So I got 100 motor units. Okay. In order to maximize, this muscle has a size, it has a pronation. We don't have a lot of control over all of that. What we do have control over is if it's got 100 motor units, can I turn on all 100 of those motor units and therefore get cross bridges out of every fiber in that muscle? Okay. And the answer for most of you in most of your muscles is no, you can't. Okay. Those of you that are better trained than others at doing a certain task can do better. But in general, in say an untrained person, you don't resistance train, but you're kind of reasonably active. In my quads, I might have 100 motor units, but I can only turn on about 85% of them. I can only turn on 85. Okay. So that's if how much can you do at the maximum end? Okay. It's my bicep. I have 100 motor units in my bicep. Do you think it takes a maximal contraction from me to curl up my Mountain Dew? Maybe don't answer that, right? I'm old, I'm out of shape. Maybe don't answer, but do you think that it does?
No.
No, okay? So we have to have the ability to know, I've got 100, maybe I can only use 85, but I don't even need 85. All I need is 5, okay? And then rather than the Coke can, I'm going to curl the chair. I don't know if I can curl the chair. Let's see. Okay. More. Not 5. I needed, I don't know, 60. or something like that, okay? You have every muscle has a certain number of motor units in it, okay? And in order to get a contraction out of that muscle, we have to send action potential from the brain down to 1 or 2 or 20, whatever it is, the correct number of alpha motor neurons to then get them to fire. So we go all the way through the rest of this to get a cross bridge to get the exact precise amount of cross bridges that we need to get that exact amount of force to be able to execute that movement. Okay. So I need some amount of force, whatever the chair weighs, a little bit more to be able to curl it up. So I have to go through a process of, okay, it weighs a certain amount. I start at motor unit 1, and then I ramp all the way up until I get enough motor units. Therefore, I get enough cross bridges to be able to make it move. Okay. That process of brain turning on alpha motor neurons is called recruitment. Okay. Recruitment. We're bringing it into play. We're recruiting it to do our task. Okay. It's called recruitment. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. Okay. Again, this is why understanding all of these steps and all of this stuff is so key and so important. All right. That's recruitment. Now, recruitment is not a random happenstance type of thing. Okay. It is very what we call orderly. There's a method to all of this. Okay. And what you guys can see, and I apologize, I have a little kind of cartoon thing in the slides if you turn it on. Okay. But what we're going to get is you start off with 1 motor unit. Okay. I need a certain amount of force. I start off with motor unit 1. Not enough force. Okay. Motor unit 2, right? I've got 2. Not enough force. Okay. 3, 4, right? Let's say I need 10 to get to a certain place. Okay. I am going to, and it seems very slow and very kind of orderly, but it really, because of practice, you're just like right to 10. That's what I need. I'm good. Okay. But it goes in this order, and the order of which fibers or which motor neurons get turned on first is going to differ a little bit for concentric, isometric, and eccentric contractions. What I'm going to show you guys, or what we're going to talk about first, is a concentric or an isometric contraction. So it's me curling up the chair. Okay. What do we get? Okay. The first motor unit that gets recruited is always, for a concentric contraction, is always the smallest. Okay. So it has the fewest number of fibers connected to that motor neuron. And because it's the smallest, it's also the slowest. And by slow, I mean it's myosin ATPase. It's a slow twitch fiber type motor unit. Okay. And so what we get as we go through increasingly more and more and more up to, let's just say 100, is I'm going to go from slow to fast, or I'm going to go from small, and I apologize, that's a fucking mess, from small to large. Okay. Anytime you do a task, you're going to turn on the smallest, slowest motor units every time. No matter what I'm going to try to curl, I'm always likely going to turn on these motor units here. And I may very rarely ever turn on the motor units that are out here unless I do maximal contractions. Okay. All right, we're going to finish with this. Why is this good? It maximizes use of energy. How so? I agree with you, but how so? Okay. Okay. It's energy efficient. That's good. Because it's energy efficient, what is it also good at? Or what do I not get by? I'm sorry? Overexertion? Can you be more specific about what you? Okay, it will help us with that. Absolutely. Fatigue, right? Fatigue. These small, slow twitch fibers, these slow motor units that are going to get turned on first, are very energy efficient and they're very difficult to fatigue. Okay. I've been standing. You all have been sat up today in your chairs. That requires some base level of muscle contractions over and over and over again to hold that posture. Okay. And yet I'm able to stand magically. I have not fatigued my soleus or my erector spinae or anything just by doing all of this, because it's a low level of contraction using these very small, slowest motor units that are very fatigue resistant. And so they fire over and over and over and over again. And it's okay. They're not going to get tired. I mean, they could eventually, but they're generally not going to get tired. Okay. As we move out and you do much, much higher force contractions, right? My muscle is the same size. It has the same force capacity. But I could probably do, I don't know, like 500 curls with this, 1,000 curls with this. I don't know. We could try, I guess, next week. Versus maybe I could do, I don't know, maybe 10 or something here. Okay. Why? Well, it's more force. It requires more force. So I have to not just turn on these motor units, I got to turn on the ones that are out here to be able to get enough force to do this. Well, these are very energy inefficient. And they contract a few times and now they're fatigued and they don't work anymore. And so what has happened as you lift heavier and heavier weights, the reason you can't lift it as many times is it takes all of these motor units to get that force. And as soon as a couple of them begin to fatigue and they don't work anymore, if I need all 100, as soon as one or two of them drop out, I can't generate that much force anymore. And now I can't lift the chair. Okay. So when we do stuff, right, like you guys are going to go and we're going to do 3 sets of 10 repetitions or a set of 10 repetitions at 70% of your 1 rep max, think of it this way. I'm using 70% of the motor units. You're really not, but I'm using 70% of the motor units in that muscle. And the reason I can do 10 reps and not 11 or 12 is as we go through all of this, I need 70% of these things to be able to fire to get the right amount of force. And some of them are going to begin to fatigue. And once they fatigue, I got to stop. And so at some point, I don't have enough motor units that will generate force to continue to lift and do that amount of weight. Okay. Does that make sense, guys? Do y'all understand kind of how all of this works? So recruitment is driven by the central nervous system. Okay. This is the single easiest and fastest thing for us to change with training is the ability to turn on or recruit additional motor units. Okay. Most of us in most of our muscles, we have extra muscle that we're not used to turning on all of the muscle. So we have more that's there that we could use. We just haven't learned how to do it very well yet. Okay. And those last motor units that most of us don't know or are not very good at turning on tend to be the largest and they tend to be the fastest motor units. Okay. So we'll kind of sum up and then I'll cut you guys loose a few minutes early because my voice really feels like it's about to give out on me. How big your muscles are matters. That's a big component of how strong you are. Okay. The arrangement of the fibers relative to the tendon in that muscle, the pennation matters for the application of that force. Okay. If the size is the most important, the next most important is how much of that muscle that you have can you actually get to contract to generate force? So what is the recruitment? Okay. Those are the really two kind of great big things, size and recruitment. Okay. When we train or we do resistance training, we want to make our muscles bigger. So we have more actin and myosin. That's going to be good. Maybe it changes the pennation. But the other thing that training does is it helps us train the ability of the brain to signal to our alpha motor neurons and turn on all of the motor neurons in it or get close to that in a given muscle. Okay. So force production really depends upon size and recruitment. Okay. On Monday of next week, we will talk a little bit more about another component of the nervous system, and then we'll actually put a contraction into motion, and we'll talk about how the range of motion matters, how the joint angle matters, and how the speed of contraction also matters. Okay. All right. Have a good weekend, guys. Make good choices.